Okay, so you can see the first slide, right? Omega-3 and kidney disease. Awesome. So yeah, I just want to remind you again that there's a very big problem we're facing when it comes to omega-3, which is that going from 2% to 4% doesn't help you. Going from 4% to 6% doesn't help you. Only at 8% the problem starts disappearing. So this is not a linear problem, and this is the biggest issue we're facing. People think they can just fix their omega-3 deficiency by occasionally taking some rancid supplements, more or less rancid. No, you cannot. And you need to get tested, and you need to get above 8%. So my recent test was at 9.6%, I think. So then you're in the safe zone. So you should tell this to everybody. That is a very crucial point. It's not a linear problem. And I talked about this in many other incidences, but here it is. We've known this for a long time, and we known that, this graph is not linear. It literally disappears at 8%. Sure, you can reduce your risk of heart disease and other diseases, but they are still very prevalent even at 6%. So yeah, I definitely want you to understand that you can avoid heart disease again and again, and it may all start with the kidney, and that's what I'm talking about today. And you don't want to end up in this situation, correct? So you just don't want to end up with a zipper. And my uncle told me this the other day. It's really a word, the zipper. They cut open your whole chest, right, from the tailbone up. So yeah, here's another study, and I keep repeating these slides over and over. So you can't repeat them often enough. Your chance of heart disease goes to almost zero at 8%, and it's not a linear problem for the people who just came in. Yes, so let's talk about kidney disease. Kidney disease is extremely prevalent now. It is extremely important to understand that the kidney is special, and that the kidney cannot be fixed. It's the only organ that cannot be fixed. And it is very, very susceptible to omega-3 deficiency. So it regulates pretty much everything in terms of metabolic syndrome together with the liver. I will talk about that in a minute here. So we need to understand how fragile the kidney really is and how susceptible it is to omega-3 deficiency. Yes, so metabolic syndrome is the umbrella that combines everything, including chronic kidney disease. And kidney disease is really just another manifestation of metabolic inflammatory syndrome, all resulting from omega-3 deficiency. So metabolic syndrome is definitely at the center of everything we're facing in chronic disease, and it's a topic of a whole nother talk. And everything is on my website, omega3health.us. You will definitely find all the information there. But metabolic syndrome is something your doctor won't mention, and your doctor doesn't understand. But it is now, accepted to be the center of pretty much everything. You can read it: cardiovascular disease, cancer, stroke, and it's all connected. Everything is connected. It's not separate. No, you're not just a diabetic. You're not just a kidney problem. You're not just a high blood pressure problem. It's all connected, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. It all comes together in the kidney realm. So yes, omega-3 deficiency is definitely at the center of metabolic syndrome, controlling obesity, insulin resistance, and hypertension. The most prevalent, understandable factors of metabolic syndrome. And many times this is also named dyslipidemia. So what does that mean? They're going to look at cholesterol and they're going to tell you that cholesterol is high. They have no idea why triglycerides are high. And we do understand this now. That is the only factor that really matters. Cholesterol is not a factor in anything. It is complete coincidence. And that information is also available on my website. So here we go. The real reason for the increase of metabolic syndrome is omega-6 is up. And with that, omega-3 is down. So omega-6 is inflammatory, but it's also a deeper problem that we need to address at some other time. It's not just about inflammation. However, we can see here that with the Industrial Revolution, our omega-6 intake has been tremendously higher. You can see that the consumption of inflammatory oils, namely here soybean oil, jumped up in the 1950s and 60s. And yeah, I mean, if you look at countries like Taiwan, they have been consuming sugar without end. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but that's not the problem. That's not the reason why metabolic syndrome diabetes is rising. It's really just actually the reduction of saturated fat. So when you stop eating saturated fat, you can basically understand that the intake of fat has to come from somewhere else, and that is inflammatory omega-6. And we have definitely changed our industrial diet tremendously. And this is not anything new, but you have to understand that it's really the reduction of lard. So when you reduce all your cooking to inflammatory oils, um, in the traditional cooking, we just use lard and butter. And those are obviously saturated fat. Butter has a lot of other factors that I talked in my digestive talk as well, but that's, the reason for the increased diagnosis of diabetes, which skyrocketed since the 1960s. And there's no end to this graph here. It's going steep, steep up. And the reason is we literally reached our threshold a while ago already in 1980 or something, where we had inflammatory indices over 20 to 1. So that is a very, very low amount of omega-3. So can you reduce your intake of omega-6? Probably not anymore. All the research shows it is literally impossible to avoid it unless you have your own farm and everything you eat is from your own farm, and making sure that you are eating very little plant products, very little seed products. And then you eat pork. What do you feed the pork, the pig? You eat chicken. What do you feed the chicken? All of those things are omega-6. So yes, this is the problem. So in Taiwan now, as an example, all the young people are diagnosed with diabetes. It's not the sugar. They've been eating sugar forever. It's a tropical climate. Sugar is very important in a tropical climate. And it's the lack of cooking with lards. Everything is inflammatory seed oils now. So omega-6 literally kills the kidney, to finally get to the topic here. So chronic kidney disease, CDK, prevalence has been rising and rising and rising. And it's due to the high intake of omega-6 versus a very low intake of saturated fat. And already a low intake of omega-3. So this is the reason that the trend is going up and up and up. And there's no stop to this either. So here's the main problem you need to understand is that Western medicine does not care. They do not diagnose kidney disease. By the time your kidney values really are in a range where it's red, your kidney is basically history. It is destroyed um, to a point where it cannot be repaired. And again, I'm going to talk about this again later. You cannot repair the kidney. It's very, very difficult. We can stop early kidney disease. By we, I mean alternative or what I do, Chinese medicine, herbs work very well. We can lower these values. We can definitely turn it around, but once your kidney is destroyed to a certain point, it is extremely difficult to regenerate it because it is such a complicated organ. So when I see kidney values go up, um, it's pretty much 5 minutes to 12. They don't care. They say, oh, this is just general fluctuations. No, you see the trend here when your creatinine and your um, urea nitrogen goes up and it's kind of consistently above the threshold. And the threshold is set very, very, very high or low, however you want to look at it. Then it's already very late, 5 minutes to 12, as I said. So, their glomerular filtration rate is set to 60, and that is pretty much a very dysfunctional kidney already. So that value needs to be above 75, I would say, to be in a safe ratio. Of course, when you get older, everything starts degrading, including your kidneys. And most people values show up, like this above 60, 70, and it's expected that this value goes down, but 60 is set way too low. So basically, these values are measured in your blood. It's not really a function of your kidney, it's just indirect. You're assuming a lot of things, so it's estimated glomerular filtration rate. Then, you calculate certain trends, and that's what you get out of it. Creatinine basically is a muscle product breakdown. Your kidney is supposed to filter 85% of it, and when it doesn't do that anymore, then you can kind of tell, oh, something's wrong here. But what? I don't know. And it's not like they have anything really to offer to fix early or late stage kidney disease. So you get the picture here, when you see fluctuations like this and trends like this, you are already in trouble. So it's a rising prevalence we're facing here. And the reason is that it's undiagnosed. So 40 to 60% of all patients with chronic kidney disease don't even know they have it. And I have patients coming in, they're saying, yeah, there's nothing wrong with me. They're telling me everything's fine. My blood pressure is fine. My thyroid is fine, but yet I am completely exhausted and I get dizzy. Um, their values do not picture the real life. Their values do not diagnose kidney disease early on. So we have millions and millions of people with dysfunctional kidneys, and that is at the center of metabolic syndrome. Diabetes, hypertension, obesity, all related to this. So, blood tests are not sufficient. Um, Routine tests are just estimations, and values are set too low. Trends are not really interpreted properly. And then you are not really put in a high risk or a low risk group. So you can actually evaluate those trends relative to your risk group. And this would be another nice graph with omega-3 where you just basically say, I'm going to divide everybody. Those are the best studies. You divide everybody into quintiles, 20%. How much omega-3 do you have? So no supplementation, right? So the highest quintile is usually 6%. And I told you before, that is not nearly enough. But you can clearly see how these risk groups then will correlate with omega-3. Let me see if I can come up with a graph of that in the future. So here we go. You look up um, kidney organizations that try to basically graph this problem and put you into categories, stages of kidney disease, A1 to 3, G1 to G5. And none of that really matters because by the time you're in G2 or A2, it's already very late. And again, it's not like they have anything to offer, but go look up this website. It's incredibly um, loaded. There's a lot of information in there, but not a single mention of omega-3, of course. So here's the problem again. So early kidney disease, your osmolarity, which is calculated from your creatinine bone, indirect blood work, is still just in a good range and it's just fluctuating. And only much later, due to the retention of the sodium, I will get to that, when your blood pressure goes up, and that's a vicious cycle, only then your osmolarity basically really drifts up, and the little red marker here, by that time, the problem is pretty much 70% destroyed kidney. Too late. Blood pressure and kidneys obviously are directly linked. It's really not rocket science, right? So the blood pressure is regulated by the kidney glomeruli, by the retention of sodium, and then it's just basic blood plumbing, basic plumbing. So you add more water to the system, you increase the system. Blood pressure is literally water pressure, and that's all done hormonally, but it starts in the kidney and of course also by the heart rate. And this is where your most of your blood pressure meds work on the angiotensin renin cycle. So blood pressure goes slightly up, slightly up, slightly up, right? And you can actually measure that your angiotensin wants to go up and up and up and up and up, right? So when your filtration rate is still, in a decent spot here, 70, you don't notice it. Even at 60, you don't notice it. But then all of a sudden, it goes up and up and up into a cycle. So this is just representation of the tendency. So everybody is different. For some people, the blood pressure shows up right away. For some people, it shows up much later. I generally like my diastolic lower value to be quite below 90. You can't ask too much these days. So my diastolic now is 65. That was just unheard of. It was low to begin with, but it's just unheard of. You don't get a lot of people having that diastolic. In any case, that is kind of the measure of your stiffness of your arteries, of your whole cardiovascular system. So when you get to 90, it's already a big problem. And we can treat that actually with Chinese herbs very efficiently, or you can just go to Amazon, Google blood pressure herbs. It's not hard, but you won't fix the problem. The problem is omega-3 deficiency, okay? So just keep in mind these tendencies are there and they're all linked together. So chronic kidney disease means what? Your kidney is starting to get destroyed because of omega-3 deficiency. I'll get to that. Meaning reduced perfusion. So the kidney basically eliminates everything, then reabsorbs it. It's a very complicated process. And that basically reduced perfusion together with sodium rises the renin, and you create more blood pressure through angiotensin. Again, that's where your lisinopril and other blood pressure meds work on. And this is basically creating a vicious cycle that I will get to. Yeah, so the renin is actually made in the so-called juxtaglomerular cells. So that's the hormone that regulates your blood pressure, your plumbing, together with the sodium. And the angiotensin, as I showed you before, rises with chronic kidney disease. There's a direct correlation here, so really not very difficult to understand. So initially, this problem is adaptive, meaning, there's some wiggle room here, so you can definitely play with these numbers for a while, but ultimately it creates a vicious cycle because the high blood pressure then destroys your glomeruli because of all those fine capillaries, and omega-3 is the factor in that. And that accelerates kidney damage, the vicious cycle. So really not super hard to understand. Um, Again, what does angiotensin 2 do? It helps with your, it basically constricts your um, arteries, and I don't have time to go into all of the physiology here, but the main part here is, when you make more angiotensin, you even retain more sodium. And of course, that will lead then to even more higher blood pressure. So that's the vicious cycle. The system is made to do that, of course, if you are losing blood or if you have a blood pressure problem, that it is reactive in that way to survive. Here is the basic function of the kidney, and it's not too difficult to understand, but in German we say the dog's buried in its detail. It's extremely complex. It's a miracle of nature. So when your blood arrives in these glomeruli, everything gets excreted, and then it gets taken back up. So the reason for that probably is in nature is because it would be too difficult to make a transporter against every possible known molecule, including all possible known toxins. So that's how the kidney detoxifies, gets rid of everything. And then everything that's important gets reabsorbed again. So how does it do that? It does it with a very, very, very steep gradient. So this is the outside of your kidney, this is the inside. So when everything gets filtrated out, basically it goes to the inside of the kidney where it has a very high concentration, pressure, and then sodium especially gets reabsorbed, and only very little percentage finally ends up in the urethra, 1%, because all of these are vital nutrients, and obviously water need to be reabsorbed, and proteins, except for urea and creatinine and some other problems that need to be excreted, detoxified, basically. So these have transporters, right? So these are very specific transporters that get rid of stuff, and everything else gets reabsorbed automatically because you can't make transporters specifically against every known molecule to make sure that you can reabsorb everything right away. So this is how the kidney works. And here you can see on the right side, your fine capillaries are a #1 player in this, right? So they don't just go through your glomeruli, they go through the entire loop of Henle, and then turn into the venous system when it's reabsorbed. So only after that, everything gets basically excreted through the urethra. So this is an extremely complicated organ. This loop of Henle is extremely clever, and it's really, again, it's a miracle of nature how this was developed. And you can understand now that this is the one organ you can't fix because in a liver cell, the liver is actually extremely simple, right? And livers turn over every few days. Um, it's very easy to understand that if you have healthy stem cells in your liver and you detoxify properly, that you can regenerate your liver. Even the lung, even the heart turns over 10% per year, not the kidney. You cannot fix this organ once it is severely damaged. They are working on it, of course. There may be stem cells in the future that will repair this. There are definitely some other efforts which I can't get into today using existing kidney stem cells. There are stem cells in your kidney, don't get me wrong, that can replace some of these functional cells, but to rebuild this entire organ, that is a very steep uphill task with stem cells. So how does omega-3 work on this problem? Basically, it activates the metabolism from A to Z. Like I always say, it's not just about inflammation. It's not just about reducing your inflammatory eicosanoids. Omega-3 does so many different things. Every single membrane protein, receptors, transporters, pumps, etc., need omega-3 for their functionality. When you remove omega-3, you not only destroy the lipid rafts, basically these membrane proteins float in the membrane in lipid rafts, and you need saturated fat for that, and you need omega-3 to keep those lipid rafts functional. You basically need these uh, fatty acids to be directly linked to those channels and transporters, you name it. There's many, many studies, many crystallography, atomic resolution studies now that show how omega-3 directly interacts with these membrane proteins and creates their functionality. Without omega-3, these proteins cannot work. So it's not just about protein, not just about amino acids. No, the fat is integrally linked. It's not just like, imagining, you need to lube your car. No, it's basically a mechanistic molecule that is integrally linked to that actual mechanism of opening that channel. So yes, we call that membrane dynamics, and sodium, potassium, ATPase is one of those, of course, in your nerve cells, but also in your kidneys. So sodium out, potassium in, that creates the gradient. And these transporters I've talked about that basically transport creatinine out need to be functional with omega-3. Then it's all about energy, of course. You need mitochondria that work. The mitochondrial dysfunction is very, very steep once your omega-3 goes to a deficient state, meaning you can't make any aerobic energy. And of course, inflammation is a big part of this. Inflammation directly in those capillaries destroys them. And the capillaries, the fine capillaries in the loop of Henle get destroyed. And that's an inflammatory process that sinks in early there, just like it does in many other small capillaries, including, for example, in your um, olfactory systems. So yes, it's about transporters. It's about activity of any membrane dynamics, gradients, created pumps. It's about aerobic energy, mitochondria, and it's about inflammation. And here's the main clincher. Omega-3 directly suppresses angiotensin 2. Who would have thought of that, right? Because it's anti-inflammatory. And the DGLA, by the way, is trying to do the same thing, right? But it can't really. Omega-3 suppresses angiotensin 2. lowering your blood pressure. And that is in turn, also very, very important for a critical no neurohormonal break. When your kidneys overact, you could fix it with omega-3, but at 2%, that is no longer possible. So very interesting word. Omega-3 is a neurohormonal break, and it directly affects your blood pressure, creating this vicious cycle. And this is the problem. You don't catch the problem because the blood work is not interpreted properly, and you have a destruction of the glomeruli in the kidneys, raising angiotensin II, creating chronic kidney disease, creating high blood pressure, which then creates more destruction of the glomeruli, a vicious cycle going on and on and on. It does not stop itself. So there's some diets you can obviously employ for early kidney disease. So when you are in that stage, you definitely need to start restricting your protein, which is a problem, right? Because we already are protein deficient. Most people can't absorb their protein. Then you need a low sodium diet. Normally, the kidneys don't care about sodium. I wouldn't eat too much sodium at once. That can definitely cause a problem, especially if you're already on the upper levels there. But in general, we are made to consume a large amount of sodium, but not when your kidneys are starting to go bad, because that will again raise the blood pressure and cause fluid retention, cause more plumbing problems. And so, all processed foods, that all snacks nowadays have massive amounts of sodium. Why? Because we like it. And the reason we like it is because it's been a deficient um, ingredient and natural. Um, when we're hunters and gatherers, it's really hard to come by sodium. That's why we develop a taste for it. So we need sodium very, very much so. And that's why we have a taste for it. And that's why it's one of our only 4 sensors on the tongue. So we know that we have adequate amounts of sodium. Potassium is another topic. Every time you overdose on sodium, you're basically reducing your potassium ratio. And so you need to keep up your snacks, like almonds and other things that have bananas have potassium throughout the day. Generally, people are not potassium deficient in their blood, but it's something to also keep an eye on. The more sodium you eat, the more potassium you need. So a low sodium diet in general is probably the way to go, but it is quite boring. And when you have a kidney disease problem that is prevalent already, you have no choice. So I'd like to keep it that way and keep my choice up and eat sodium. Again, in a general healthy kidney, it's not a problem. So yeah, I just talked about potassium, bananas, citrus, potatoes, tomatoes, um, and obviously there's other ingredients in processed food that leach out potassium. Yeah, so whole grains. Yeah, so you can't absorb whole grains without proper omega-3. I talked about that in 2 talks previously. Um, Basically, your digestive gut system does not work without omega-3. So you can eat all the whole grains you want, and all it does is will end up in your large intestine feeding a more or less hostile population of flora, creating more leaky gut problems and more destruction and systemic inflammation, leaking more into your kidneys. So yes, we started farming 15,000 years ago, and grains are a big part of that, and they are very rich, and there's some craving. I personally, as a German, I crave wheat, I crave grains, but I have to restrict it to a very, very low amount. It's like candy, actually. So some grains are good. Once you are omega-3 balanced, you definitely will absorb those grains, not if you are deficient. So healthy fats, what is that? Saturated fat, as I talked about. We grew up on red meat. Saturated meat contains, I'm sorry, red meat, hunters and gatherers, red meat, venison, or a grass-fed, grass-finished cow contains saturated fat. That's healthy fat. Okay. When the pig is fed grain or corn or whatever, that fat turns more towards omega-6. It's not that healthy anymore, but still, it contains almost no omega-6, so that's why it's healthy. You can no longer up your omega-3 on fish, and it's dangerous to eat fish. You can eat canned sardines and anchovy, etc. It's not gonna really get you balanced to a high omega-3 level. So that's why they've been telling us limit saturated fats. No, you know, you do not limit saturated fats, because that is the biggest lie generated in our recent history of industrial food production. Um, when you limit saturated fats, you only increase your omega-6, and obviously trans fats are very dangerous. We've known that for a while now. So they shifted this whole discussion towards trans fats for a while now, and trying to improve our industrial food production so that it doesn't contain trans fats. Hydrogenating oil creates that. Why do we need to do that, right? If we eat saturated fat, we don't need that. So yeah, that's where the whole circle goes bad. You can definitely hydrate, but water just gets stuck in your interstitial fluid. It has to be processed. We call that dampness in Chinese medicine. Stagnation does not help you. So, when your urine starts getting scanned, that's another sign of definite kidney problems. Dehydration can happen at any stage, even with a healthy kidney. And then, your urine is getting scanned. So there's a large dysfunction here that kind of pictures that whole problem of chronic early kidney disease. So I became dehydrated in Taiwan earlier this year on a bike ride. It's very easy to do in a tropical climate. So yes, you can't sometimes drink enough water, period, because even if you drink the water, it just stays with you in your system and not getting processed. So, yes, you can do something with diet. You can control your sodium and everything. But really, omega-3 turns the tide mainly because it keeps your capillaries happy. You want to have happy, small capillaries. Then you can regulate your blood pressure correctly. You can have happy membrane proteins, and you can detox properly, and you protect your entire cardiovascular system. And this is basically not a linear problem, as I mentioned early on. Omega-3 needs 8%, not 2, not 4, not 6. It needs 8% and higher. Then you will be in a reduced state of inflammation finally, because that's when you get to a ratio of 3-to-1, 2-to-1 inflammatory. That will lower your blood pressure, that will decrease your sodium retention, that will slow down your kidney disease. So instead of creating a vicious cycle, what is the opposite of a vicious cycle? Um, Good cycle? I don't know. That is a question that needs to be answered. And I hope I made this all clear why 8% matters below 4%, high inflammation, high ratio. Just 4 to 8 is a gray zone. It doesn't really help. It's just a partial benefit. The protective threshold, and this is all published over and over, and 8% is what keeps your kidneys safe. You do not want to lose your kidneys. Protect your glomeruli, protect your blood pressure, and you will see that once you are balanced, your diastolic is going to go down, and you're going to ask yourself, why is that? And by the way, taking blood pressure meds does not protect you. It's like putting a masking tape on a check engine light. Your diastolic may go down a little bit, but it also means that your systolic goes, your upper value goes down to the point where there's no blood reaching your brain. So people are overdosing on these medications, could be in a state of dizziness, fainting. It does not really fix the problem. It just puts a little masking tape on your check engine light that you can still look through. That check engine light is still on. So yes, get systemic benefits through omega-3, and do not get into this cycle where your bun is your blood value is basically already showing up above its normal state when you see that little tendency, and you don't want to fall into those blood pressure vicious cycle problems. You want to definitely keep good care of your kidneys, and look at your blood work and explain to everyone that that blood work is not really catching the problem. And I hope I made that all clear today. So here's another problem why it doesn't really show up. So patients with early kidney disease have a thyroid problem already. It just doesn't show up. So it's called thyroid 6 syndrome. So basically the TSH is still normal in your blood work. And the reason for that is complex, and don't have time to get into this physiology here. But my point is that the system does not really show a thyroid problem until it is much, much too late. And you still get all of the symptoms, hair loss, weight gain, definitely thyroid is involved in this process too, but yet it doesn't show up. And again, this has a name, euthyroid 6 syndrome. So doctor will tell you everything's fine. Yeah, your kidney values are fluctuating, but doesn't matter. It's okay. So yet you have lots of problems, lots of fatigue and thyroid problems. So this is why. Again, I don't have time to get into this physiology here today, but the main part here is just finishing up is you want to basically test, and we have our balance test. What's your omega-3 value? Is it above even 3%? Your likelihood of having 2.5 and less now is probably 80–90%. That's what my test shows. And we have that published now too. Probably I should talk about that publication the next time, that we just officially peer-reviewed publication. And that's what I have for today. And I would like to just give you a little sneak preview cancer scan next time. It's actually omega-3 deficiency, how that cancer scan works. So yeah, get tested, take your omega-3, and then you are protecting your kidneys. Any questions? So yeah, if there's no questions, I'm gonna basically stop the recording here, and we will reconvene in a month.
Well, thank you very much for this
Yeah,
Zoom tonight.
yeah.
Very, very interesting.
I agree. And every time I do these, I learn how everything's connected, especially under the umbrella of metabolic syndrome. And physiologically and Western medicine, it's all about really looking through the narrative, right?
Now, when I come to think about my past with all the diseases that I had and so on, you know a little bit about it. Um, that all makes sense more and more the deeper I dive, through you and all the others that tell us about it. Lots of things make so much sense by now, and I just wish we'd known this a long time ago. Anyway, my life would have been a totally different one,
Yeah,
and I'm so
it's a sad
grateful.
story. It's a sad story because we are definitely not told the truth. And you can't blame the doctors. They are definitely not understanding this connection and they just throw their arms up. So,
And the thing
but
is,
no, it's
I
never too
come
late. That's the issue here.
right.
Until the
That,
kidney is destroyed, it's never too late.
right. And I just found out something today that there's a drugstore owner in Germany. They study a little bit different than maybe somewhere else. And he says that it's not possible to measure the fluidity, the cell membrane fluidity, because not in a dry blood test. And they are out there right now. They are really after Senzino now, since Senzino has this huge, um what
Yeah,
they had in
that,
netco lately.
and you kind of wonder why they pay attention to something this minuscule. Um, and the membrane fluidity, yes, it's an indirect measure, but it does correlate with the whole inflammatory cascade. So the membrane fluidity is definitely a big issue. Um, we know that from Parkinson's and so on and so on. Lipid rafts, I talked about them earlier. It's very hard to measure, yeah. But it's also very hard to really measure the kidney function. These are all indirect measures, right? So,
Well, but each of us proves proof that it's working and that it's right.
mhm. Yeah, we do definitely prove to the entire world that when you have an omega-3 value above 8%, your problems will go away. Is it instant? No, and that's the problem. May it take 3 to 5 years over 8% to really fix your problems? Yes. And that's, the big problem here, right? Omega-3 is not a quick fix. It is a baseline. It is something you have to do every single day. It's the number one thing that matters. Okay, well, I'm gonna stop the
Thank
recording
you so
here.
much.
And thank you very much for coming in today.